Hi, I'm Nelly, a program manager in the SQL Server team. In this video, I'm going to cover how you can deploy a predictive model in SQL Server using R services. I will begin with a quick intro to R services before diving into a demo. With SQL Server 2016, we released R services, which basically integrated the R runtime with the database engine. R is a very popular statistical and machine learning programming language. The biggest advantage with R is its big open source community and thousands of packages available. R is great, but there can be some challenges using R. For example, when you execute an R script, the data is moved to the R runtime. This can cause problems if you have large volumes of data. The movement of data also can pose security risks. And how do you call your R script from an application in production? Sometimes you have to recode the R script in some other language to make this possible, and this can be time-consuming. And most R functions are single-threaded and only accommodate datasets that fit into available memory, and this limits scale and performance. SQL Server R Services provides in-database advanced analytics capabilities. This means that we are pushing the intelligence to where the data lives. This is a big win for developers. Now you don't have to build all of this logic separately in the application layer. And just like you can share data from databases across multiple applications, you can now share predictive models. By pushing the intelligence closer to the data, we also address the challenges I mentioned before. We reduce or eliminate the data movement since you can push the compute to execute on SQL Server. You can now deploy your R scripts and easily access them by invoking a T-SQL stored procedure from your production application. And when it comes to scale and performance, you can leverage SQL Server capabilities like parallel query processing, column store indexes, and in-memory tables alongside your R scripts to boost performance. In addition to that, you can also leverage RevoScale R functions for parallel execution. Before going into a demo of how to build your first predictive model, let's go through the process of deploying a predictive model with SQL Server. You can basically start developing and experimenting in your favorite development tool. It's easier to debug and experiment this way until you are happy with the model. Once you're ready to deploy, you can train the model in the database by moving your R code into SQL Server inside a special stored procedure called SP-execute external script. Once the model is generated, you save the model to a table, and now you can use that model to predict an outcome. Now let's go through a demo where we create a predictive model in R and deploy it using R services. We're going to start developing our R script in an R development environment. I'm using R tools for Visual Studio, but you can of course use any tool that you prefer. The first step is to connect to the database and get the data we want to use. Let's look at the data. As you can see here, this data is ski rental data, just giving us the number of rentals that happen on a specific day. And we are actually going to predict the number of rentals for the future. The first step after that is to prepare our data. And we are changing some of the columns here to factor types, since we want to tell the model that these columns contain categorical values. It's now time to train our data, or train our model. Before we can do that, we're splitting the data set into two different sets, a training data set and a testing or validation data set. Now we can generate two different models. The reason why I'm generating two different models in this case is that we want to experiment and we want to derive the best results. So we're going to generate two different models and then pick the model that is the most accurate. One of these models is a linear regression model, and the other one is a decision tree model. It's now time for our prediction. To predict, we're going to use the model objects that we just generated, and we're going to call the rxpredict function. Down here, you can see the results from the two different predictions. You can see the predicted value of the rental counts, and you can see the actual values. and the rest of the columns. Now, to compare the accuracy of the two different models, there are different methods that you can use. To keep things simple in this case, I am just going to plot the difference between the actual and predicted values for each of the models and try to get an understanding of which one that is more accurate. And it seems like the decision tree model looks more accurate since the values are less scattered in the plot. Let's use that and deploy it in SQL Server. I'm moving to SQL Server Management Studio. I already have my data in the database here. It's the same rental data that we used in the R script. Before we can generate the models, we have to create a table where we can actually store the model. Now that we have that table, let's create a stored procedure. And inside of that stored procedure, a call to sp execute external script, where we can copy some of the R code that we used in Visual Studio. And we're going to create this stored procedure in order to train our model. But the training doesn't happen until we execute it. So let's execute this stored procedure and save the output from it, which is a model, into the table that we created. As you can see down here, this is the actual model object saved in the database. Now let's create a stored procedure to predict the rental counts. In this stored procedure, similar to the previous one, you can insert your R code inside the sp execute external script call. And the output from this stored procedure is going to be a result set containing our predicted values. Before we get our results from the prediction stored procedure, let's create a table where we can store the results. Now, in this step, I'm going to execute the rental prediction stored procedure, and I'm going to save the results into a table. I'm doing this because I happen to have a web application that is built with Node.js, and this application expects JSON types to be returned to it. So I'm going to create an additional stored procedure where I select from my table and return the types as JSON. You can see the results from this stored procedure here. Now, if I go to my application, I can simply do an identical call to the stored procedure to get my JSON results back. I'm going to start my application here and go to the browser and refresh. And as you can see, I now have the predicted results in my web application, and I can use this to make my application more intelligent. Now you know how to build a predictive model in R and deploy it using R services. If you would like to walk through this demo on your own, please visit aka.ms/SQLdev/R. Thank you for watching.